The reason why I wanted to talk about my journey as part of the first session is I fundamentally believe that urban misgovernance, or all the misgovernance that we are seeing in cities, and specifically in a city like Bengaluru, stems from urban apathy. Very often we tend to blame politicians, saying politicians are corrupt, politicians are inefficient, politicians do not care. While much of it is true, we generally tend to ignore one important aspect, which is our own apathy. And when I talk about citizens' apathy, I don't take a moral high ground, because I was pretty much a person who was, Hari used the term callous, but I would use the term, apathetic. That is, I just did not care. People are very often shocked when I tell them that I had never voted in my life till about 7-8 years back. Probably I would request now Ujjwala to put up a presentation. I have a presentation which I wanted to sort of take people through. When I tell people that I had not voted, many of them are shocked. But at some level, people also realize that it pretty much describes many of us, right? As urban, middle class, upper middle class citizens, we think that the political system is dirty. There's no point in engaging with that system. It's a dirty system. It's a system where my participation is probably not going to make any difference to, and hence, what is the point? And it is in that context I wanted to present my own journey, and if this journey can inspire more and more people to either start participating or ultimately get deeply involved, it would be wonderful for me to see, because I believe if we need good governance at the municipal level, if we need change, if we want our cities, and specifically a city like Bengaluru, to become beautiful, we don't have a choice but for citizens to start taking part. Over the next 6 sessions, various team members will be taking sessions on how citizens can involve, how citizens can actually play a very crucial role in bringing about that change. I'm not going to cover that today, but I wanted to cover how urban apathy is also an equally important contributor to urban misgovernance, as much as political apathy is an important reason as well. I come from a corporate background. I've had a successful corporate life. I come from a strong academic background as well. If I were to look back 7-8 years back, I can't even imagine where I've reached now, because my life has been very comfortable and cushy, with a nice family, nice corporate life, earning a lot of money. There's nothing much to really complain about from that perspective. And in that context, I was a non-voter. Ujjwala, if you can move on to the next slide. I had not voted primarily from the perspective of saying, what is the point of voting? The choice in front of us is usually between somebody who's a criminal versus a thief versus somebody who's incompetent, somebody who's uneducated, and so on. The choice, as the cliche goes, is between the devil and the deep blue sea. And I used to vehemently argue, what is the point of voting? Because there's absolutely no point in choosing between the devil and the deep blue sea. But I didn't realize that my life was going to take a substantial turn in a different direction, which will lead all the way to me founding a political party. Ujjwala, if you can move on. If I were to look back at my journey, it was completely serendipitous. All that has happened completely by accident. None of this was planned. But if I were to look back at this journey, I would say there were 4 key defining moments or turning points, as I would like to call them, which has shaped my journey. I would say which has reshaped. Otherwise, if these had not happened, I probably would have continued living my life, continued my corporate world, continued to earn money, just led that simple life. But here I am today talking to you as the founder of BNP, which is a political party. Ujjwala, on to the next slide. So let me take them one by one, right? Which are those 4 turning points in my life that shaped my career, and I say that has shaped my destiny here? Number 1, I say that my social life actually started with an anonymous letter. It's a very interesting story. I repeat, this whole journey and what I've gotten into, it all started with one anonymous letter. I live in an apartment complex on Old Madras Road. I've been living there for 15 years. Some of us had moved in very early into our apartment complex in 2008. So we all had gotten together. We had set up the apartment association. We had set up the bylaws. And then we had stepped out of the association and let a few other people take charge in the managing committee over a period of time. Sometime in 2012, 4 years after I'd moved into the community and 2 years after we had set up the whole thing and handed it over to a set of people, when anonymous letter hit all our mailboxes. One of the residents in our community had put in a letter in all our mailboxes, and it was a little bit of a shocking letter for all of us because it pretty much said that there is a lot of misgovernance happening now in our apartment complex. There is probably some amount of corruption that has crept in, and that person was very anguished that things had degenerated to a very bad level. And interestingly, he ended that person who put that anonymous letter in our mailboxes, he finished that letter by taking the names of two of us, saying myself and one more friend of mine, both of whom had been instrumental in setting up the whole association. It was almost like a request to the two of us saying, you were instrumental in setting up the whole affairs. You had done a great job in setting up the bylaws and setting up the whole thing. You have passed on the baton to somebody else, but now things seem to have degenerated. Why are you not getting back? It was almost like a trigger for me to say, hey, why is this happening? And it's important for me to really get back in because we were all very passionate about things going in the right direction in our own apartment complex. It's a small apartment complex with just 81 flats, but we had set it up very passionately, and it was almost like a request that came to the two of us. And by the time I had built up a lot of goodwill through a lot of initiatives, and people then came to me and said, why don't you take over as the secretary of the apartment complex? So in 2013, I took charge again as the secretary of my apartment complex. Thankfully, there was not much of corruption, even though there were some small pockets here and there, but it was more of misgovernance that was there. When I say misgovernance, to my dismay, I realized that the sewage treatment plant in our apartment complex had gone kaput. The water treatment plant was not working well. The water management system between Kaveri water and borewell water, that was not working well. The fire management system was not properly in order. Garbage, there were a lot of issues that we were facing, so on and so forth. A lot of the things that are very, very integral to the running of an apartment complex, some of the key aspects relating to water, waste, garbage, electricity, etc., they were all not in proper working order. So over the next 1 year, I took on the responsibility, I put together a team, and we gradually started putting things in place one by one by one. And at the end of the 1 year tenure, it was an extremely gratifying tenure for me, extremely rewarding tenure from the perspective that every system was set right. In fact, can you move on to the next slide? One of the fundamental things that was happening was we have a sewage treatment plant in our apartment complex. The vendor who had been engaged to manage the sewage treatment plant, instead of managing the sewage treatment plant, there was a bypass to the stormwater drain. That person was letting raw sewage out into the stormwater drain. It was actually criminal, right? It should not have been done, but that was what was happening not just in my apartment complex, many apartment complexes. I was shocked beyond measure because the same sewage through the stormwater drain was ultimately entering the lake and it was causing the pollution. And it was completely unacceptable for me. So we put task forces together, one for sewage treatment plant, one for water management, one for garbage, one for the fire management system, and so on. And one by one, we started setting things right. Interestingly, before I took charge in that tenure, I didn't even know what a sewage treatment plant was, and I didn't even know how it worked. But guess what? It didn't really need that expertise. because I was able to talk to relevant experts. We were able to reach out to vendors. We were able to read up some stuff, and I developed a good understanding of what a sewage treatment plant was. And we were able to engage with vendors, and by just applying basic principles and common sense, I was able to bring in the right set of people who could get this in place for us. It did not require rocket science. It did not require a great deal of understanding or expertise to set things right. But over a period of 6 months to 1 year, all of this was set in place. So the first key learning that I had was, if there was integrity, if there was intent, and if there was competence not to do things but to understand how things work and to put systems in place, I realized that there are a lot of things that we can accomplish. Even though it was at a small community level, it gave me a great degree of satisfaction to see that the small things that we can do at the local level can lead to a big change. Interestingly, not just a sewage treatment plant, at that time there was no concept of segregation that was there, or segregation of garbage. We actually put a system in place to segregate garbage as early as 2013, and we actually put in a process in place, and we imposed penalties on people who were not segregating. It was a completely new system at that time. There was a lot of resistance from people, but we managed to get it done. So the fundamental learning that came for me was, change lies in the small things that we do. Change lies in each of us taking part in the process, taking part in the system. It was at a community level without any doubt. But even at the community level, if we didn't have passionate people getting involved, we could see that the systems were degenerating over a period of time, and a lot of social evils were getting formed because of that. So that was one key learning that I had. Moving on to the next slide, Ujjwala. The second key thing that had happened was, interestingly, what happened during my tenure. I had actually started interacting with a few of my neighboring apartment complexes. I had reached out to them purely from the perspective of learning from one another, forming a group, exchanging ideas, and see if we could work together for the common good of all of us. But one interesting thing happened, and that's why I call it destiny. Of all the years, the Bengaluru Water Supply and Sewerage Board chose that year, when I was the secretary of my apartment complex, to pass a rule where they hiked water tariff specifically for apartments by 300%, calling us as bulk consumers. And we couldn't understand why they were calling us bulk consumers. It was a ridiculous rule, because we were all individual houses consuming exactly the same amount of water like everybody else was. But suddenly they were classifying apartment residents as bulk consumers and charging us 300% more. It was unacceptable. It just ramped up our water bill by 300 to 400%. And that's when I mooted the idea to all my neighboring communities, saying, why don't we start a federation of apartment complexes, where we create a platform to fight against such harassment that we were facing from this government and civic agency. So I formed this federation called as Bangalore Apartment Federation. Quite a few apartments got together. Then one of the first things that I did, along with others, was we started meeting the civic agency officials, politicians, ministers, etc. And we started representing this issue to them, saying, hey, we seem to be getting imposed with some ridiculous and unreasonable rules. What is the origin of this? And interestingly, it was not just the water tariff hike. There were a whole host of things that started happening. They started imposing additional cesses, tariffs, rules, etc. And I started engaging with many politicians, ministers and officials. That was one big both tree moment for me, like what Buddha underwent sitting under a tree. Every official that we met, every minister, every politician that we met said the same thing. Oh, you guys, you are living in apartment complexes, you are rich people, you do not come out and vote, you are not a vote bank for us, you don't matter to us, and hence, if we impose a rule on you, you better listen to us and you abide by it. You don't have a choice. And they were able to say it openly to our faces, saying, this is what it is, you don't have a choice. And that was the second key learning for me. I, till that point of time, had not voted in my life, and I realized that by not voting, we were actually inflicting misery upon ourselves. Politicians listen only to two things. They listen either to votes, which is understandable, or they listen to notes, that is money. Money is something that we can't throw at them. But if we vote, they actually consider us as a vote bank, they listen to us. And I realized that by not voting, the whole misgovernance that we were seeing, we were inflicting it upon ourselves. So from there on, I became a convert. I started actively propagating to everybody saying, we need to come out and vote in big numbers. If we need our voice to be heard, if we want change, we need to go out there and vote. And even as of last week, when Bengaluru came out and voted, Bengaluru had the least of the voting percentages across Karnataka. It's a problem that's still not gone away. It's the problem that we are still grappling with. But I think things have improved quite a bit from where we were a few years back to now. But that was a very, very important learning for me. Moving on to the next slide. People ask, did voting actually change anything? Actually, it has changed a lot of things. Over the last 5 years, Bangalore Apartments Federation has evolved into a federation of 1,200 apartment complexes. In a lot of apartment complexes, voting percentages have increased quite significantly through a sustained campaign that we ran. And the reality is, in the current election that happened, this article came out about 2 weeks back, 1st May to be precise. Parties have started wooing apartment residents. We had multiple parties, Congress, BJP, JDS, Aam Aadmi Party, all trying to engage with apartment residents and trying to understand the problems of apartment residents and saying that we want to solve these problems for you. How did that happen? There's only one reason. They have now started treating apartment complexes as vote banks. So one of the things that I say is that we might not be able to, even if we are not able to influence the quality of politicians, even the politicians who are there, by voting, you can actually force them to do at least a few good things, if not all good things. So that was another important learning that came through for me, and we could see a sea change that happened from 2015 to 2023. Moving on to the next slide, Ujjwala. The third turning point that came was in, I would say on December 14, 2017. I'm giving a precise date, 14th December 2017. There was one particular rule that the government had passed relating to sewage treatment plants, where they had mandated old apartment complexes to have to be implementing sewage treatment plants, which was practically impossible to do because old apartments are not designed for that. There were safety issues that were coming up, but they were just not willing to listen to us. The government was getting wrapped by National Green Tribunal and Pollution Control Board saying the lakes are getting polluted, and the government in turn started targeting apartment residents and complexes saying we need you to do something. Same thing, when we went and asked, they said, you're not a vote bank for us, you don't matter, whatever we tell you, you better start listening to us. 1 year from December 2016, we kept on fighting a battle. I in fact made 9 trips to the National Green Tribunal in Delhi fighting a case, and I realized that even the judiciary was failing us because all that we were getting was adjournment after adjournment after adjournment. I used to go all the way, wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, catch a 5 a.m. flight, reach Delhi by 8 a.m., reach the National Green Tribunal by 9 o'clock. At 10 o'clock when the hearing came up, adjourned. All it took was for 5 seconds for the judge to say, this is adjourned to another date next month. It was just extremely painful, trip after trip after trip, spending my money, waking up at 3 o'clock, going there, spending the whole day just to get the whole adjournment done. And finally, when I got a hearing in front of the chairman or chairperson of the National Green Tribunal, all that he said was he couldn't even understand the issue. We represented for 1 minute. He said, I don't understand this issue. You have to come for 3 or 4 more hearings. That is the day I said, I came back. I told our team, we are now undertaking a protest. The government has failed us. The civic agencies have failed us. The judiciary has failed us. Let's take this political. So we, from early September to early December, I'd set a date, 2nd December 2017. I said we need to undertake a protest. I set a target for our team. I said we are going to get 10,000 people out on a protest. And when I said 10,000 people, people were shocked. The fellow governing council members were shocked. They said, how are we going to get 10,000 people? I said, I don't know. Let's reach out. Let's engage with people. Let's engage with citizens. Let's make them understand the gravity of the issue. And we have to get 10,000 people out onto the streets to protest. We picked the date, 2nd December 2017, to undertake a protest. 3 months of intense effort, structured process, reaching out to people across the city. 2nd December, we asked people across the city, specifically residents of apartment complexes, to come out and carry a placard saying we cannot implement this rule. What happened? Moving on to the next slide. On 2nd December 2017, when I put this thing up on 1st of September 2017, saying we need to get 10,000 people out, my own fellow team members didn't believe that it was possible. But through a structured and intense campaign that we ran, engaging with citizens, believe it or not, on 2nd December 2017, 10,500 people. We kept count area by area and we got people to come out. 10,500 people came out and stood in protest against that rule of retrospective STP imposed by the government on apartment residents. The result of this campaign was on 3rd December, we made the front pages, the headlines on pretty much all the newspapers. And believe it or not, 14th December 2017, within 2 weeks, we didn't have to do anything. The entire government machinery, barring the chief minister, the number 2 home minister, the number 3 Bengaluru development minister, the mayor, the water supply board chairman, the BBMP commissioner, the pollution control board chairman, all of them in one room. They called us for a meeting. I made a 1-hour presentation. At the end of it, they asked us, what do you want? I said, I want the rule to be reversed. Believe it or not, in 1 minute, the Bengaluru development minister of that time, Mr. KJ George, who has also just gotten re-elected as an MLA, it took him 1 minute to reverse that rule. And he invited the media, and in front of the media, he declared that this rule, which was imposed 1 year back, is now reversed with immediate effect. And the biggest learning that came for me at that time is we, the citizens, have all the power in our hands. Provided we are able to come together, provided we are able to unite, provided we work together for a cause. And without citizens coming together, we would not be able to see the change. And that was one big learning that I had from that protest and the subsequent result that we got out of it. Then last point, coming to the next slide, the 4th turning point. Even in 2017 and all, I had no intention of starting a political party or getting involved in politics. What we had done was we then started getting more and more apartments together and started building up a movement where we were generating more and more awareness and fighting on these causes. But there were 2 specific incidents. I would say it's not actually just one incident. 2 things that changed my life completely. Number 1, in 2018, after all this protest had happened, I think in March or something, one of the presidents of one of the apartment complexes in South Bangalore, he called me on one fine day and he said, I have a problem. They were segregating garbage 100%. Through Bangalore Apartment Federation, we had run a campaign across multiple apartment complexes in the city, and we had gotten pretty much every single apartment complex to segregate garbage 100%. And we have a concept of a blue bin, green bin and a red bin. Blue bin was for dry waste, green bin was for wet waste, red bin was for sanitary waste. So we used to keep these big bins outside and for the vendor to come and collect it and then dispose it in an environment friendly manner. But interestingly, what was happening in that apartment complex was there was a contractor that they were working with. That guy used to come with his vehicle. He used to pick up all this garbage together and then he used to mix it in front of the gate in one single vehicle, mix everything and probably go and dump it God knows where. And predictably all the residents were upset, saying we are putting in all this effort to segregate garbage. Here is the contractor who's coming in and mixing everything. What's the point in doing all of this? And what we had done through the federation was we had suggested the name of two agencies called as Sahas and Hasirudala, who actually were charging 3 or 4 times more than these contractors, but used to take the garbage separately and dispose of them. Interestingly, what happened was when they wanted to go with Hasirudala, they got a call from the husband of the corporator. The contractor, the garbage contractor, was nothing but a benami of the corporator. And a call came to the president of this apartment complex from the husband of the corporator, who threatened this apartment complex and this president with 3 things, saying, if you choose to go with another contractor and if you do not continue with this contractor, I will ensure that the road in front of your house is dug up. I will ensure that the khata, the ownership certificate which is still in the builder's name, will not be transferred to your individual houses, and I will ensure that the Pollution Control Board issues notices to you, charging you lakhs and lakhs of rupees as penalty, even if you are in conflicts. It was a shocking moment for them, being threatened by an elected representative or the husband of an elected representative. For what? For doing things the right way. In essence, the role or the job that the elected representative was supposed to do, they were doing it. And not only were they being threatened for doing it, they were being threatened if, or rather this elected representative was destroying whatever they were doing, and they were being threatened for doing the right stuff. And despite my best efforts in telling them that I've started the federation so that we can all stick together, please do not cave into these demands. But ultimately they were worried about what these guys would do to them. They ended up going back to that original contractor. And believe it or not, despite all the segregation efforts, that garbage in a mixed form was ending up in landfills. It was a moment that I would say significantly altered my life, because it was one key moment that made me realize that notwithstanding all the effort that we were putting in as citizens, if we didn't have good elected representatives, we were in for a really tough time and the city had no future. But then there was one incident that happened which was even more, I would say, life-changing for me, a tragedy of unimaginable proportions. Right in front of my apartment complex, we have a traffic junction which is an extremely dangerous traffic junction where the traffic speeds up, and we have been crying for a skywalk at that junction for a long time, because we ourselves used to cross that road at that spot. It was very dangerous, and we had been going to the corporator ward committee meetings and entreating them for a skywalk. It just didn't happen. And as fate would have it, in 2018, a girl who was trying to cross the road, a 17-year-old girl who was trying to cross the road, she got run over by a bus and lost her life in a fraction of a second. Why? Because there was no skywalk. And was this something that was an accident? I don't believe it was an accident. I would say it was a planned murder. We knew that this problem had existed and we had been crying hoarse. Because of that civic apathy, because of that apathy from that corporator and from the officials, because of the lack of a skywalk, a 17-year-old girl lost her life. And this is while this is an incident that I keep talking about, subsequently we have seen so many lives lost due to potholes and other issues that have been happening. And one key learning that I realized that day was, we cannot expect the kind of people that we have elected to deliver governance for them, for us. Politics, it was a moment of strong realization for me that politics has been, or misgovernance is happening, and politics is dirty not just because the bad people got in, it was also because the good people stayed out. And that is the time I said, this is something that needs to change. In a way, these two incidents were the seeds for ultimately I getting into political life and saying we need to get into municipal governance, at least if we have to change our city at a fundamental level. Ujjwala, if you can move on to the slide, next slide.
Srikanth, we have spent 30 minutes, just keep that much.
And the slide after that, I have come to the conclusion. Can you move on to the next slide? Ujjwala, can you move on to the next slide, please? So, the fundamental principle that I'm working on right now is the state of infrastructure and civic communities in our city is in shambles. We all keep cribbing and complaining. You know what? The fundamental thing when it comes to politics is we all discuss, debate, fight on religion, caste, and all kinds of issues. But when it comes to municipal governance and civic issues, we just do not engage in any kind of a discussion. So I would leave this thought behind with all of us. If we need our cities to become better, if we want a city like Bengaluru to become a world-class city with world-class infrastructure and with world-class civic amenities, if we keep relying on the time and tested politicians that we keep electing and expecting anything better from them. I was just having a discussion with Kirti Bhai before we joined. If you look at the MLAs and corporators that we've been electing, it's pretty much the same set of people that we keep electing again and again and again. Expecting change from them is not possible. It's like trying and doing the same thing again and again, expecting different results. It's not going to happen. The only way the city can change is if the good citizens start coming together and taking part in politics, to start with by voting, then consequently taking part in area sabhas and ultimately getting into politics. That's the only way a city like Bengaluru can change and can change for the better. And that is the initiative that we are trying to get into and implement through Bengaluru Navanirmana Party by getting more and more good citizens to come in, take part, and slowly start ushering in change and good governance at the grassroots level.